I look forward to talking today about this new discovery that we have in Peru. It's a copper-silver discovery. Some of you may have been here yesterday and heard about the most important things that you really want in a discovery these days, and that's scale and grade. And we've got both of those in abundance. I think I'll be able to demonstrate that in the short 10 minutes that I have. So the guy that was just speaking is in the middle there. That's Quinton. Lars Darlenborg down the back here. He's the president of the company, and that old guy is obviously yours truly. That was us last week. We were wandering around this property before coming up here. I will be making forward-looking statements, of course. So this is a new basin discovery. This is a style that is very well known in Central African Copper Belt, the Kufa-Schiefer of Poland. These deposits are the second most prolific style of copper in the world after porphyries, and they form vast systems that have mined for literally decades, if not 100 years in some of these areas. We recognise this potential only relatively recently. I've had 25 years in Peru. I know Peru very well. I bought a database with my business partners back in the 90s from a company we work for, so we've got large data resources. So we had a hint there was copper out there, but it wasn't really until the last year that we've learnt the context of this copper. And that's come about because the petroleum industry has spent hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, exploring in the area which we're in. They were the only guys that had the gumption to go out into these areas 20, 30 years ago, when it was one of the major coca growing areas of the world. That ended 2 decades ago, but it kept guys like ourselves out. So that's how something so large, so high grade at surface at least, that we found has really been sitting there. But the oil guys gave us lots of data. We've got the resources of a major company in something that is so early, which is a very unusual circumstance. Preliminary work, we've only done preliminary work last year. We did it on what we'd call a smell of an oily rag. It was a low budget program, but demonstrated a hell of a lot. This year we've just raised a few $1 million. We'll put that into the ground with geologists wandering around, mapping, putting this into context over the next 6 months. So we will learn 10 times as much than we have on this property since acquiring it over the next 6 months. The scale is vast, and I'll show you maps, but we're talking over 100 kilometres of tenure, 660 square kilometres of mineral tenure, so it's very large, and we're finding nice high grades consistently over that 100 kilometres, literally in the same geological context. So you can see some of the grades there. We're seeing 2 to 5 metres at 2 to 5% copper. We're seeing gossans up to 80 metres thick that are running lead zinc, which is part of the copper system. The periphery of the copper is lead zinc, and these gossans that are 50 to 80 metres thick are running over kilometres too, just where we found them. It's a huge system. Importantly, this is driven, and I'll talk about that by salt of all things, and I'll explain how and why that is important. So we're still a small company, market cap around 11 million, a few $1 million in the bank. We've just been recognised a little bit more over the last few months, but this is early days and a very new story that is just coming to the market. People who've worked together for a long time. We've made lots of discoveries around the world over the last decades, and we believe this is our next one. So here's a map. It sounds like deepest, darkest Peru. It really is not in terms of access. We fly into Tarapoto, which is a town of 50,000 people, half a dozen flights daily, a few hours drive on bitumen to these projects. So it's not hard to get to these areas. The map showing the areas there is the scale is down the bottom. There's 20 kilometres, so that's over 120 kilometres from the start to the end of our areas there, and we found copper over all those areas. This is just a map of the Central African copper belt. We're not exploring there, but we put the Wayaga Basin, where we're exploring, in yellow over that, and the search space is big. We're about a third of the size of the copper basin, which is one of the most prolific copper basins on Earth. So you can see what we're looking at has significance, and you need these big areas to source the copper from the rocks to concentrate them in the areas that we're starting to find. A few photos of the lay of the land. As I mentioned, bitumen roads, relatively accessible. It is jungle, high jungle, about 6,000 to 1,000 metres, but there's oxygen. I've spent a lot of time in the Andes, and it's nice to climb hills with oxygen in your lungs again. So I've said this is how the magic happens. I was asked by the organisers here to keep the geology down, and now I've put up a stratigraphic column, which is how we map the rocks through geological time. But this is really important, and there's only a few things to take from this here. That little red box at the bottom, it's called the perennial salt. That salt dissolves and scavenges the rocks just immediately around it and below it, and it forms these very metal-rich solutions. Salt, of course, rises, it's lighter than the rock mass, and brings these metal-rich solutions that are oxidized, looking for the trap. So source, transport and trap are the three things we all look for as geologists, but they're very evident here, and this is because we've got the oil data. We know stratigraphically where we sit at every point. We know where those structures are because they've been mapped with the seismic data, and those red stars are the places in the stratigraphy where we're finding this copper, and there's varying styles, like I've said, thinner, higher grade copper zones, very thick gossans that are a little higher, and we're mapping these over very large areas. So that is the geological magic recipe that has put this together, that really was not understood at all until really the work of Lars and the team down there on the ground have pulled this together over the last 6 months, essentially. So there's Quinton down at site. He's scratching out copper. That's a 3-metre zone at 2.5 metres of copper in it, just a road cutting. We're doing the basic stuff first. We drive 20 kilometres north, and there's 2 metres at nearly 6% copper and a couple of ounces silver on a permit that's 75 kilometres long now, and that's only showing the southern end of that permit. So that's the kind of stuff we're finding. We're finding boulders all through the creeks, and even just down in this southern area of that licence there, we believe we can trace this copper horizon with some continuity over a few kilometres. This is 80 kilometres north of where we've just been, where Quinton was sitting on the ground there. And this is a cross-section. And not only is it long, 100 kilometres, we're looking at a zone that's 8 to 10 kilometres wide. And that red zone is that stratigraphic trap where we're finding the copper where it outcrops around these geological structures. And you can see these are boulders, so they're not outcrops in that instance, but the grades are very good. We've got grades going up to 20% copper, not shown there, but 6 to 8% copper, and there's always 1 to 3 ounces of silver here too, so this is significant in silver. You also find cobalt in these systems, and we're starting to see cobalt in those big, thick gossans also, so we've got a lot to work out. So what are we going to do? In 10 minutes, I've just shown you a new basin scale copper discovery. It's taken the attention of not only the market, but a lot of people, because it's not generally the case that new discoveries are made these days at this sort of scale. So we've got a lot of social permitting to do. We've got a team, as many social people on the ground as we have geologists. We're going to do stream sediment survey sampling over our large area. We've got geologists running up and down creeks. We'll run soil samples. We're starting to permit for drilling. That is a timely process, as many people have heard already for those exploring in Peru, but we think we'll be drilling towards the end of the year. But we don't want to drill, we always want to drill early in these things, but not too early, so we've still got to determine the best places exactly for that. We've got $1.5 million budget that will be spent this year, and we're fully financed. So in summary, great big discovery, very high grade. We're very excited, and we hope you come along and join us on the ride. Thank you very much.